Okay, our first question. Our first question is for Rabbi Weiss. The question states, in do you believe that Jewish involvement in Marxism and communism was a form of Zionist nationalism?
With the help of the Almighty, Zionism is basically a transformation from Judaism out of the religion. In other words, to move away from the religion and to give it a aura or some type of legitimacy as if it would be the representation of Judaism. While Marxism is simply many of the Jewish people, unfortunately, around the world have gone away from the folds of Jews. They became Reform Jews. Reform means exactly what it means, that they're going to transform the religion. They refute that God gave the Torah, most of them, and they say that they don't keep the commandments. So it's just another way of going away from God. So Marxism and all these things are just moving away because they're not satisfied with the religion. But it's a different type of a way of rebelling against God, basically.
Thank you. The next question is for Dr. Fawzi. What will the Arab Spring mean for the future of the Zionist state?
Well, first of all, I want to see the Arab Spring put strong feet on their land and to start taking over. For the Zionist state, I mean, they know that they have no choice. In the final analysis, they have to recognize the Palestinian rights, and they have to accept the self-determination for Palestinians. We'll take just an example, Egypt, for example, in the last 2 days about the gas that they are selling to Israel. They have to review it. They have everything is connected to the Palestinian problem. Zionist entity cannot continue surviving the way it is, and I think it will not survive the way it is now because they have to accept the Palestinian right.
Thank you. The next question, Mr. Weiss, how do you determine who is more religious? I'm from a community in New York that is pro-Zionist. How do you determine who is more religious? Is it by the size of your beard?
First, I wanted to make a slight correction on the last. I said it's another way of rebelling against God, the different forms of people who went away from, where they fought Marxism and all these types of things. Not that different forms of political approaches is rebelling against God, but when these people, most of these people, left their religion and they rebelled against God. But basically, I just wanted to correct that. Zionism is the movement in and of itself is a rebellion against God. I just wanted to correct that. But anyway, basically what you're asking, I'm not gonna. The one who asked the question, obviously, first of all, his approach is obviously just disrespectful, but who cares? I mean, I'm not the question. The answer is not to him, but to the other people to understand that the point of Judaism is that Judaism is one thing only: to obey, to observe, all the laws, the 613 commandments of the Torah, which is the Torah is 613 commandments. Anybody, if you want to look with a truthfulness, you will go to which communities and see which communities are observing the Torah. You will find the ones who have made a fool of they don't follow the Torah in many aspects. Whether it has to do, they don't observe the kosher. They don't. Every issue of Torah they don't follow properly. That you will find in Zionist communities. When you will go to non-Zionist communities, or you go to any community again around the world, in every country there's a very religious community. You will find if they're very religious, they're anti-Zionist. And I wanted to. It's very important that you remind me also. If you go into the Holy Land in Palestine. Palestine, occupied Palestine, you'll find that the majority of religious Jews don't send their children to the army, the majority. And they haven't sent. Why? Because they're not going to die for a cause that they know is against God. Now, some of them, it's a very long issue, and I can't get into that. Some of them are part of the government that they say they want to transform it, and we're not condoning that. Many people don't have any association with the state of Israel because they say it's totally rebellion against God. But even the ones who do, if they're from even the religious community, just even they're not so very religious, but they don't send their children to the army because they're not going to die for a cause. They say the fact is the state was created, we have to fight from within, and all these different issues. But they don't fly Israeli flags on the buildings, even the ones who take funding from the government are there. Our community, thank God, very large communities, doesn't take any funding from the state of Israel. But even the ones who do, you'll find the vast majority don't take it. Now again, look around the world, the religious communities, the very religious who observe, who are God-fearing, who do everything because of it, what the Torah requires, does not support Zionism in the state of Israel. You go to the march now, they have them in New York, and you'll see that they have the Israeli Independence Day march. You will find again that the whole scene is a very non-religious scene. You'll have a few yarmulkes, you'll have a few covering the head, but the vast majority you'll find is non-religious, and that's a fact.
Thank you. All right. The next question is posed to both speakers. If Israel and the Palestinian government were to achieve two states living side by side peacefully, would you support the existence of Israel as a Jewish state?
You know, I refuse the term Jewish state. As a Palestinian, I cannot accept that. It's a recognition of I mean, when you say Jewish state, I had an argument with a lot of people about it, especially Jews. What does it mean, a Jewish state? Is there rules? There is no constitution in Israel, so we can't say Jewish constitution. But is going to go religiously? That's what they mean, because the Israelis has to decide first, and there is a problem, and I cannot go into that, widely. They have a problem to decide who is a Jew, and what does it mean, Judaism for them? Is this nationality or religion? What an Israeli Jewish, if he say I am an atheist Jew, does that have any meaning? What does it mean, an atheist Jew? That's it. Now, I will say if two states will take place, which I don't see how it's going to take place. I don't think that two states will take place. But let's assume they can call it whatever they want. They wanted to call it a Jewish state, that's their problem. But don't ask me to recognize it as a Jewish state.
And
Yeah,
Rabbi
I mean, my hurt of my heart, Dr. Fawzi just said. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's no such thing as a Jewish state. But if they do make this tumor or growth or whatever called so-called a Jewish state, that'll make it. Not only we won't recognize it, as I explained in length, the Jewish people are forbidden to have 1 inch of sovereignty. It's a rebellion against God, even if it doesn't affect another people. In other words, if it's not stealing, even if it would be given by the Palestinians or whatever the issue, we are forbidden to have it. We would never accept it. And I just wanted to say, I mentioned, and while I was talking, I saw somebody up front who was, when I said that Jews lived in Muslim lands and we lived in peace and so forth. Yes, I'm not saying there was never any bumps in the road. I mean, there always this happened, but we flourished and lived, and we were able to constantly constantly throughout the history to live in the country, and the history attests to that. You can go to every country. Of course, there were some bumps around. They want to play up the issues of these little bumps. Who's talking about what happened in the Christian lands, the bumps in the road, unfortunately, Hitler and the Crusades and the Inquisition. So I'm just people should understand that. But again, we will never recognize a state of Israel. We can never recognize such a thing because it's the Torah doesn't, God doesn't. It's a rebellion against Judaism, the religion of God.
The next question is for Rabbi Weiss. Where are the voices in the media, such as yourself? Why do we constantly hear Zionist voices, thoughts, ideas, and not the voices of the real Jews, such as yourself?
Well, again, I'm going to have to turn to what I said originally. It's the works of Satan, because the fact of the matter is, they say we don't exist. We're a fringe group, we're a minority. I was pointing out that if you look at the crowds, unfortunately you can't see from there, look at outside, the crowds, the big communities we have, the tremendously large communities, whether it's in the United States or you can see the demonstrations, we have tens and tens of thousands of people. And yet, when we made this demonstration, we make in Manhattan or in Washington, D.C., tens of thousands of people, the streets get blocked, and they'll say, and they never get reported. Yet when the Zionists, Steve Weiss, whatever his name is, these Zionist leaders make even 50 people, and it gets splashed in the news. Or AIPAC makes their conference, and you have to see how they go. The police cars ahead of it and back of it with whirring sirens, and every person comes there. But there's a reason for this. If we say it's the works of Satan, but everything works out in a physical manifestation. So what you'll find is, in other words, God lets some things happen, and it takes a form of logical thing. The fact is that they have AIPAC. They're so big, they have so many congressmen, and no, it's just they're efficient. They have AIPAC that they intimidate. If a politician dares to speak up too sympathetically for the Palestinian issue, or so forth, then they're committing political suicide. What they do is the Zionists will take a candidate, a no name, and they'll infuse millions of dollars and put them up. The same thing with media. The media, what they do is, this is a fact, that they have, first of all, they own some media outlets. Secondly, they take a person. Thank God, over 30 years, I've been interviewed in the media. And I can tell you that I've had from every major newspaper, from the Washington Post, from the New York Times, and there was a big article. But the fact is that we've been interviewed hundreds and hundreds of times, and they'd spend hours with us, and it wouldn't get printed. We'd ask why. The editor cut it out. This gets cut out. Because what happens is they intimidate the newspaper. They threaten them that they're going to go to the advertisers. They're efficient. The Satan is efficient. They put such pressure, such intimidation, and they back it, just in case you can't call them the mafia, because they back it with this aura of religion, that you're anti-Semitic. So they have this cloth that makes it look legitimate why they're intimidating people. So it has a whole system how it works. We make a demonstration. There will be hundreds of thousands of Jews who will be coming out constantly with us. And there are tens of thousands, thanks a lot, and sometimes more. There will be more coming out. But after every demonstration, almost invariably, tens of people lose their jobs because they take pictures of the ones who go to the demonstration. In our faces, they take pictures, and then they look, and if they find a face so they can look, works for this corporation, and they call up somebody else who advertises with this, and they threaten the boss. And it works in a system. They're very efficient, unfortunately, with their inhumane tactics. And that's a fact, just what they're doing to Palestinians. Our hearts cry for the people of Palestine. We feel they're suffering from them, and we feel it on us. They're suffering what they're going through. God should help that it should stop dismantling the state.
Can I say something about this? In fact, I want to say something about it. The same question can go for the Arabs. Why we didn't hear or read on the Arabs or Palestinians in the media? Well, let's be direct to the point. The American media is controlled by Zionists. We wrote articles. I sent to the Washington Post. I sent to the New York Times. I publish few, but if they publish one article, then you have 10 Zionists, Israelis, whatever, answering you. There is a blockage. And when they publish something, it's like they can say, you see, we also publish here. Look, we have in that issue, 2 years ago we published this article, and a year ago we published this. But it is the monopoly of the Zionists on the media is unbelievable.
I know I don't want to but it's very important. And I always plead with people. I've been doing this for years. Unfortunately, the older generation is passing on. We have a history of a very beautiful history together. We plead with people: go to your elders. Take a tape recorder so they don't have to write. Ask them anecdotes, stories of communities. Dr. Fawzi was just telling me about a few Jews that they knew and so forth. So let the personal anecdotes of community anecdotes of what happened, how we lived together, and that this should and if you pay for advertisement, it should be at least recorded and it should be advertised. If the newspapers don't want to write articles about it, pay for the countries, which Arab, some countries, something which it should be printed, that the world should start asking questions. If they lived so well together, what happened? That the people should see the truth, to take away this terrible portrayal of our history and what the Muslim community is.
All right. Due to the time constraint, we're only going to be able to ask about 2 more questions. We have a question for Rabbi Weiss. Do you think the destruction of the state of Israel will create a lasting peace in the Middle East?
I don't know who asked that, but the word destruction is not in my vocabulary, basically. And it could have been used maliciously. I'm not sure that they wanted to catch me, that I should say, oh, it was destruction. And after my long-winded speaking for maybe 2 hours, they'll take out, hey, he said the destruction of it. You say, I caught him. And they'll be able to use that line. We don't talk about destruction. We plead to God. Just as I mentioned, the USSR, God, this big bear, what it was called, and went under peacefully, and we plead to God. God is capable of everything, and His total compassion to bring a total dismantlement, a peaceful dismantlement of this impediment to peace. Now, what was the question about the dismantlement of the state? What did you ask?
The destruction of the state of Israel. Would it bring peace to the Middle East?
Well, one thing is, first of all, we are certain, of course, it's any logical person who's studying the issue sees that. Why is there a hate around the world? And as I mentioned, it's called the Ummah. The people, Muslims, feel attached. And a lot of the animosity and a lot of it is created in a lot of issues against America because of the support of Zionism, against Europe, the European countries. Everything is intertwined, and so it has repercussions in Europe and many other issues. So there's no question that if you would take away this like I say, this cancer, this tumor that's creating so much hate and animosity, then it would be definitely a catalyst that would bring to much more peace. To say that it would bring world peace throughout the world, that I don't know. I'm not a prophet and I don't know. But one thing is certain: it's the cause of bloodshed, and if you remove it, then we'll definitely be doing God's will, and God says that this causes destruction. Remove it, there won't be this destruction, and there'll definitely be much more peace on the world, and hopefully maybe settle all the problems of these Middle East and so forth.
All right, and our last question for today is, what is your advice for students to achieve peace and harmony? And how can they help with the Palestinian cause as students?
As I've said, there's 2 issues here. First of all, we believe that we have to do, and one of the issues is, the first thing is to pray to the Almighty who brings the ultimate results. That means to pray to God with concerted prayer for the speedy and peaceful and total dismantlement of the state and peace on the world, and that God should bring prosperity for the United States and for the whole world. We have to pray, but at the same time, that does not relieve us of the obligation of doing that, to stand up and to inform people, have people know of what is happening to the people in Palestine, the people in Gaza, and know, if you are knowledgeable about the issue of the religion and Zionism, the difference, and then you won't be so intimidated if you won't use the wrong language, don't call it the Jewish state. You won't be so intimidated. You'll be able to stand up and say, excuse me. On the contrary, because I'm not an anti-Semite, I want the removal of the state that's causing anti-Semitism, that's causing Jewish bloodshed. Because I'm concerned about the Jewish people. Why should they suffer? Why should Jews around the world suffer because Theodor Herzl decided to make a state? And so forth. In other words, they should be knowledgeable, and then stand up and speak to people. We went to Gaza. I went to Gaza, and I'll just tell you one little anecdote. We went to a place called Zaytun, Al Zaytun. There was the Samuni family. I went to visit them when they went to the hospital in Brussels. They were hit by when they attacked Gaza. Unfortunately, around 30 members of one family were murdered. And we went to visit them a year later. And they were living, so the whole world knew about this family at least. Yet when we came a year later, they were still living in tents. Tents means pieces of plastic over a wire. They didn't have water. It was freezing in the winter, brewing in the summer. People are dying because they're lacking, they have brackish water, they don't have medical attention. So there's so much to talk about. And yet the people look at them, and the human rights activists don't do anything because they don't want to get involved in this religious conflict. They'll rather do for other problems on the world, which it's very right to do. So we have to know that this has to be pushed into the world, to the attention of the human rights activists and the people, and don't be intimidated. Let them know these people are suffering. We must help them, and we must, with God's help, pray to the Almighty, and we hope we'll end this occupation.
In fact, I agree with most of what the Rabbi said about it. I had to add a few things. I think what's not visible with the students, and this is from also my experience, is they don't challenge. I mean, if you are in the class and and you ask a question, and suddenly the professor will say, "This is anti-Semitic." Now you have to challenge the professor. You have to stand up and say, "Wait a minute, what is anti-Semitic?" If you open a dictionary and look at in the dictionary, anti-Semitic is anti-Jewish, which is that's not correct. The fact that they are using it doesn't mean that this is correct. So we have to stand up to challenge, but by using logic and not just motion. You have to try to convince the other part, and to convince them you should know. And if you should know, you should read, you should listen. And I think that's one of the ways that very important for the college society to deal with this conflict.
Let me just say that people say one of the just logical points. Again, we reiterate again, there's no legitimacy for the state of Israel according to the Torah. We oppose it entirely. But even the concept, because of the Holocaust, therefore they went to Palestine and took the land from the people. What if many people said if they have a complaint to Germany or to which countries were involved there, so then they should have made their country in Germany or whatever. Why are they taking away from the Palestinian people? So the only reason is obviously because they're using the Torah again, and they're abusing the Torah and using God to manipulate, to do this thing. It's all wrong. It's not logical. It's against God. God help a total and speedy and peaceful dismantle. Back to the Palestinian rule, we can once again embrace and serve God together in harmony as we've had for hundreds of years.
Thank you two gentlemen so much for coming out and shedding light on the situation.